What do you think an immigrant needs the most? A job? Yeah, they do. A house? Yeah, I think they do. To feel like they belong? I think that's the most important thing. But very often, it feels like we talk about the first two and similar topics to that. We ignore the part of belonging. And we forget that if we don't sort out belonging, every other thing kind of collapses at some point. Fatemeh Alhosseini, she's the executive director of Impakt Foundation, joined me on the podcast to explore that topic, but most importantly, to describe why she thinks that is the best way to approach immigrant support. Enjoy. I mean, first of all, thank you for doing this with me, honestly. I mean, for many reasons, honestly, because one is, yes, I think you're a perfect person for the Women's Day thing we want to do. That's one. Two, most importantly, is that I think we have a very, very important conversation we're about to get up. But off we go to the races. I want to just kind of know, first thing, you moved here 2014. That's like 10 years plus.
I know.
Do you ever think back and wonder, like who you've become between the lady who moved here 10 years ago and who you've become today? Like, what's the journey been like for you?
It is really interesting. When I came to Canada, I was only 22. And I had no idea. I came as a student. I've never lived in a foreign country before. And when I came, everything seemed so intimidating. And I remember thinking the idea that I had back home about success was that I'm a smart person, and I don't need to. Ooh, what's that? Look at
That's
that.
interesting.
I'm a smart person. A little bit of self-celebration, but yeah, I was thinking that I don't need to try so hard for stuff. Like, I can pass the exam with a little bit of trying, and if I try, it means that I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough. And then coming to another country, I realized that it's all about trying. And I cannot rely on those fixed mindsets that I had about success. So I realized that I'm not the top person in university. I'm not the top person anywhere here. I'm not the funny person that I used to be back home. People are not laughing at my jokes, and it seems weird to them, which was really heartbreaking. But then I realized one valuable lesson, which was shifting from fixed mindset to growth mindset. That yes, I don't know stuff, but if I try hard enough, if I use the resources that I have, maybe I get there. So that would be like the biggest change, and I'm so grateful for my immigration journey that made it possible for me to see that and to understand that. And I came as a student. I went to U of T for my master's in developmental psychology and education. And I did a research exactly about that, fixed mindset versus growth mindset. And then I realized, oh my God, like how fixed my mindset was about myself and the sense of success. And I see it from people who are coming from mainly the Middle East, India, even China, that they feel like, oh my God, I have to be the best at everything. And I have to rely so much on my intelligence without really trying. If I try so hard, it means that I'm not good enough. So I did a research about that. And then I finished my master's, I did a PhD, and I specifically studied resilience among newcomer youth, mainly refugees. And at that time, it was during the Syrian crisis. So many refugees came from Syria. And the reason why I studied resilience was so personal again, because I was in a situation that I felt like I'm not really resilient. I don't have what it takes. I felt like I'm not even in a right place. Who am I to do a PhD? I'm a nobody. So, and I remember specifically in the department of psychology that I was, most people were Canadians. They were mainly like they all spoke English perfectly well. It was their first language, and I was the only one with this weird accent and like not knowing the system. So I felt really out of place, and I really wanted to study resilience for myself, for the most selfish reason. And then when I started doing that, when I started doing that, and I studied resilience, I realized that I really need to go very deep and understand the stories of people who went through trauma and then either survived or thrived. And I did that with teenagers, with like awful stories from back home, coming as a refugee, not really wanting to be here. And then I realized that, contrary to my own clinical psychology background, resilience is not really a personal feature. It's not like it's not like you either have it or don't have it. It's not like your intelligence level. It's not like your skin color. It is something that is portrayed in the ecosystem that you live. Is the
Hmm,
capacity of the system that either makes or breaks people.
interesting.
And that system, so you might ask, like, so, okay, what would be the role of the individual in that system?
Yeah.
The role of the individual in that system is to navigate the resources and understand the risk. So here is a risk, and there is like five different resources that I have. If I use those resources, it's going to be resources minus risk, which is going to be my resilience level.
Interesting.
But then we sometimes get so stuck in the risk or trauma or whatever that's happening that we forget that we have resources. Or sometimes the resources are so hidden in different parts of the system that it's kind of impossible to navigate them.
Hmm,
So then I realized, so when I did that research and I understood that, I finished my PhD, and then I was like, I don't want to do academia based on what I understood about resilience. And I really want to do something to make a change. And that was where I got involved at Impakt Foundation.
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions for you, which is around that thing, because that thing you raised about resilience is pretty interesting,
Hmm.
and it makes sense in a way, in the sense that our resilience levels are affected by a function of how we see the risk or the stress we are facing, plus the support we get around us.
Hmm. Hmm.
Now, and I'm talking. I'm going to use the context of the immigrant basically,
Hmm.
and we can expand that. This the immigrant refugee or the general immigrant. Where's the place for people who somehow find a way to do it despite all odds? Are those the outliers? Is that a case of where the system looks at the outlier and goes like, "Oh yeah, that fella has done it, so that's the person to look at. Look, is that an outlier, or like, yeah, just from your research, you're already shaking your head and that's the answer.
Actually, it's really interesting. For years, I'm going to do a little bit of history of psychology here. So back in the 90s and 80s, for years, researchers studied those outliers and trying to understand, is there a genetic thing? Is there is there a neuropsychological thing? What is it that makes some people more resilient than others? And then we have so many actually studies of those people. But then it's really interesting when they did these studies, and then more psychologists came in the years to come, and then they kind of redo all those studies, and then they realized that even for those outliers, when you clearly understand the system that those outliers are in, then you can explain it systemically. It's not, I don't want to make a claim that the person has nothing to do with their resilience level, because it's not true. It's the person itself is part of the system. It's like the person, their genetics, their family, the school, the policies around that, the environment. But then it's too simplistic to think that one person can do it for some strange reason because they wanted to, against all odds.
We love the stories, though.
We love the stories, and it's beautiful, and we should talk about those stories, and we should understand them more deeply. Like, there might be so many risk factors, but there might be one good teacher there that would change the dynamic suddenly. Or like one program that he used to go and that made him strong. So there are so many different factors, and it's too simplistic to think that there is some kind of internal strength that some people have and some people simply don't have. And that understanding, when it extends to services and social support, it can change the way you think about support. It can change the way you think about how people succeed. Because unfortunately, in the support systems that we have for different vulnerable groups, we tend to put too much responsibility on the shoulder of each individual and think that, oh, we just provided the services, so if they cannot succeed, they don't want to. And we again forget to really consider the complexity, consider the intersectionality, consider different factors that might impact somebody's strength level.
One more question now. I want you to tell me about impact. Do you think that people who choose to immigrate already have a certain form of resilience that allows them to, this is just a random question, that gives them the chance of, or they are more likely, or they are predisposed to be more resilient just because they choose to, because the action of saying, of recognizing that the system you are in is not exactly working, and trying to find another system that works, and start trying to find your way around that system. Do you think that, whether those people are more predisposed to resilience than others?
I don't know. I have no idea. That's actually a very good hypothesis. We can work on it and we can do research on it if you want. But it really depends on. I really think it really depends on the situation that they chose to come.
Yeah, there's that.
or
Yeah,
they're
fair.
forced to come.
Yeah, there's that.
Because
Yeah.
for someone that's like forced to come, it's a different story, and they're
Yes.
more exposed to the risks,
Mm, mm.
and maybe those risks kind of, I don't know, take a toll on them, or like they're less likely to use the resources because of those risks and
Yeah.
intersectionalities. And so, yeah, let's do a study on that.
No, I think so. You know why? You know why I asked that question? Because I agree with you. Like that, I think there are two types of immigrants. There are people who move on their own volition. There are people who
Mm,
have to move because of war,
exactly.
stuff,
Mm,
And then, so once we have that categorization, I think the next step is you now think of how does the government think about immigrants? And why I asked that
mhm,
question, because I was thinking about a lot of the phrasing I see when people talk about immigrants. It's people who, government people, like, first of all, there's the utilitarian phrasing, the economic immigrant, all those things.
mhm,
And even like, I give people the respect that people are hard to change. And so if someone thinks in a utilitarian way about the immigrant, I'm like, okay, is there some way to sort of help? Like, I can't change how you think, but if I can change how the system approaches building newcomer supports
mhm,
with how you described it, then
mhm.
then maybe we get a win-win, because the utilitarian gets the full value of the immigrant. I hate that phrasing, but I accept that life is not utopian, and I'll be naive to think that I can get all I want in the world. But it's like maybe there's a balance somewhere of, if we can build better
Mm.
systems, and then so the economic thinker gets what he or she wants, a fully functional, fully valuable immigrant, and the immigrant themselves get a support system that gives them the chance
100%.
to more likely succeed than not succeed. So that was why I asked that question.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And if you're talking specifically about like Canadian
Yes.
immigrants
Yes.
and
Yeah. That's.
refugees, I have to say, like, they are like one of the most educated, wealthiest immigrants and refugees who are coming to Canada because they could make it to Canada. It's a difficult journey. Um, and recent actually government data showed that around 75% of immigrants coming to Canada have some kind of university degrees, college
That's
degrees,
interesting.
compared to around like 25% of the Canadians. So it's, if even if you want to look at with a business lens, an economic lens, I really feel like it's a wonderful opportunity for any country to have resources like this. And it's a huge loss of resource not to acknowledge that,
Yeah.
not to use that. Yeah, I can talk about this forever, honestly.
Me too, honestly. So, impact. I mean, I find it so beautiful that you actually, like, you did your PhD and then you just like, you know what, I'm gonna do this straight. But like, how did you decide on impact? Because I mean, I feel like there are a ton of because I think yours approach is pretty interesting, and there are a ton of other
Mhm.
support organizations. Like, how did you
Yeah.
say to yourself, okay, impact is the one? Like, how did you do that?
Honestly, I didn't choose Impact at the beginning. They approached me and they
Interesting.
said they needed a board member who has immigration experience and research experience. And it was kind of the first time in Canada that somebody asked me to be involved in something this big without me approaching them. Um, and I was like, "Do you know how old I am? Like, do you have any idea? I'm just an immigrant." And they were like, "Yep, we exactly need you." And then when I got involved, I really get to understand the importance of being in a small nonprofit that gives you a lot of room for innovation. So when I got involved as a board member for a year. I was co-chair of the board for another year. And then I got involved as the executive director uh, because the previous executive director had to leave for family reasons. And then it was a really difficult choice for me because I was like, I've never worked in Canada beside like academic jobs. I've never worked in a nonprofit sector. But then the Impact Board really lives the values that they are trying to kind of see in the world. And they were like, we support you, we teach you, we need more immigrants to be in these kind of positions. It doesn't make sense for us as Canadians or as like people in business or corporations to do this. This has to be someone innovative, someone with the lived experience, and someone with research experience. So I got involved. And so, to give you a little bit of background about Impakt Foundation, the whole idea of the Impakt Foundation started in 2019, and it was based on this wonderful story called Taylor's Project. So, the Taylor Project was when, in the aftermath of World War II, some Jewish business people decided to basically rescue some of the Jewish people in the concentration camps, and they brought them here to Canada. And Canada was not as inclusive in the past, so they had to label them as tailors and as workers, so they can come with those kind of visas. And then when they came to Canada, so they rescued around 2,500 people. And they came here. Many of them had no idea how to sew or what to do. But then they were given the opportunity and they had to learn. And they did that. And they built beautiful lives. And now their kids and grandkids are like pioneers of different industries in Canada.
That's some
I
story.
know, I know. And then the child of that businessman who decided to do this initiative, Larry Enkin, who passed away recently, he said, you know what? The issue is kind of the same. Refugees are coming every day from all around the world and they don't have a job. So what if we give them a job? So that was the simple idea of Impakt Foundation. And then because the board was so connected with corporate Canada, they were like, okay, it has to be simple. We have access to the corporations, we have access to jobs, and they're refugees, so we just give them jobs, right? However, they realized that it's not that simple. They actually did that, they had some success stories, but then soon they realized that many of those immigrants and refugees who were given jobs are either unhappy with their jobs or they left their jobs or there's a mismatch between their skills and the jobs that they were provided. So that's where I got involved. And then the beauty of being in a small agency is that we didn't have any legacy to protect.
Yeah.
We didn't have any government funding to say, oh my God, that's a restriction. We need to just act within those boundaries. So I got involved. I said, you know what? We are going to put a hold on everything. We need time. We need research. So we actually put a hold on everything. And we did this comprehensive research, talking to as many people within the settlement sector and newcomer service providers as we could, talking to people within the government, talking to people within different corporations, and most importantly, talking to refugees and immigrants themselves. We have various focus groups with people from all around the world with different professional backgrounds. And that research and that understanding of the landscape really determined our next step and the strategy that we are having right now. So, to give you a little bit of like very brief summary of the findings of that research. First of all, about settlement organizations and newcomer support organizations, we realized that unfortunately there is a huge competition between different organizations because they're all funded by IRCC. And unfortunately, the IRCC funding is very restricted. And like it has to be very specific to that specific program. And there is a very extensive reporting attached to it. So those organizations have to always walk on eggshells and being very careful. And not having enough space, time, or money for innovation. And then on the newcomer side, the most important thing that we realized, we actually asked this question that I always talk about and I love it, which is if you had all the money in the world and you were told to start a nonprofit for newcomers in Canada, what would you do? What would be the focus of that nonprofit? And because many of those people that we had focus groups with were refugees, we thought, okay, so naturally they're going to say employment, housing, like child support. But then to our surprise, they didn't say that. Almost all of them in different focus groups at different times said belonging and community. That's what we need.
Yeah.
We need to know, because one thing that I realized personally when I started talking to those newcomers was that so there's so many services available out there. There is a lot of duplication of services, and then there is no clear roadmap on how to navigate that system. So we are having this wonderful, well-intentioned government and services that are really trying to support newcomers. But then the way that they want to do it is by just scattering and hiding the services all around the city. It's like a treasure hunt, and you have no idea if those services are going to be suitable for you. You have no reliable resource to tell you that, oh, this was good, it was okay, and if you specifically have this profession, I think you need to go to this organization. It's not like that. And they keep asking because honestly the answer was a bit strange to me. With all that need, again they said community and belonging. And I dig deeper and they said, you know what, even just as simple as asking a question and getting the right information. And I realized that there are several kinds of newcomers in when they get to social services. The first kind, they exhausted the system. They go to every workshop, every program, they use everything. And then they're like, you know what, we used everything and it didn't work out for me. Or I used one or two programs that was helpful, but then after that, they didn't have anything to offer to me because I have this very specific background and the kind of programs that are available out there are very basic and very short term. That's one thing. There is another kind that doesn't use any of the services or any programs, and they're mainly refugees. Why? Because they don't trust the system. They don't trust the organizations because they're like, we are going to different organizations, they get all of our information, and we go to one or two programs and that's it. So, and they're so worried that like, if I use those services, if I use those programs, does it mean that I'm not going to get the government support, financial support that I'm getting? So there is a lot of miscommunication and confusion around that. Or there are refugees who are, and newcomers in general, who are really just relying on their friendship circles that they have. If a friend tells them, oh, you should go there, they do it. Otherwise, it's impossible to get them to programming. So when we realized that, and we realized that the main need is community and belonging, what we started to do is really searching the system. If there is enough programming for this issue, and if there's enough services or support for this issue. And we realized that with all those restrictions, boundaries, it's kind of very difficult to initiate community development, belonging, because that's not something that you can put in a box.
Yeah.
So I was like, so we were like, as Impakt, there was a gap, and there are wonderful support services available out there that cannot fill this gap because of the restrictions. And us, as social philanthropists and as an entity that is not supported by the government, so we don't have restrictions, we have unrestricted funding. We don't have a lot of funding, but we do have unrestricted funding. So we use that funding to fill this gap that otherwise cannot be filled. So we started doing different things for newcomers, by newcomers, to create that space for them. The reason why I say for newcomers, by newcomers, was that, again, in that research, we realized that the newcomers are really pissed at the kind of programming that is very top-down, expert-driven. I'm the expert, I know better than you, and this is the workshop that you need to go. I can't tell you how many times I've heard from newcomers that, oh, at the end of the resume writing workshop, I was the one teaching the teacher. So, because they're skilled, because they're educated, and they need specific kinds of support. But then in this system, that it's just very restricted and very like in different boxes, programs in different boxes with no flexibility, it's difficult to do that. So we decided to do that. And whatever we do in the organization, even from creating a logo to conducting a program, designing a program, doing evaluations, is for newcomers, by newcomers. And how we do it is that the first step actually that we took to get there was to hire refugees from those communities that we support. And not just like previous refugees who came to Canada 10 years ago. No, the refugees that are living in shelters right now. So we hired those people, and then we tell them, you know what, you're here to tell us what is it that we need to do. And then you're here to help us with program design, program implementation, and evaluation. And you're here to echo the voices of your community. And at the same time, you can advertise for our programming in your community. And it worked. It really worked. Like, for every program that we have no issue with the number of people who participate, because it's always like people coming, and when we ask them, why did you come? They always like, oh, a friend suggested me, so of course I come. Even the ones who never use any other services. So that was the moment that we really understood the importance of trust.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they come, so another thing that we did was to understand the system of support. And then we were like, we are a small organization. But then, so we don't have the restrictions. But there are so many big organizations with lots of money and already in place infrastructure, already in place programming. So we are here to create community and belonging, but at the same time, connect newcomers to those services that we trust. Because they told us that we need someone to tell us, I use this is going to be helpful for you. So we have refugees who use different services, and then based on their experience, they tell us that, oh my God, this organization is good. But then another thing that we do differently is that we don't just refer them. because newcomers are sick and tired of being referred to different organizations. I was talking to a caseworker in a refugee shelter the other day, and he was like, you know what? I refer my client to an organization, and then they come back to me saying that they referred me to another organization, and they referred me to another program. So it's like, it feels like that the refugee gets into this loop of getting referred and referred and referred and getting frustrated. So what we do is that we, as Impakt, approach the organization, approach the social services, approach the private sector companies, whatever that we know that has good practices, and say, hey, we have this number of refugees. We did a need assessment in advance. We like this program of yours. However, you need to be flexible to the specific needs of these refugee groups. And if they say yes, we continue working with them. And then we refer our clients to them. So we make sure that this is personalized and it's going to work. Otherwise, we don't refer them. And the good thing about this is that, and about what we do, is that we don't limit ourselves to settlement organizations or refugee support organizations, because there are so many other resources out there that are not necessarily newcomer support, but they are willing to extend their support. About this wonderful community building program that our newcomers love, I just want to explain it a little bit so you know how we did that collaboration. So we realized that many of the refugees coming to Canada, specifically refugees, unfortunately, one of the first things they hear is that you're a nobody here. Forget about your past, forget about your credentials, and just start something very basic. That's why we see so many doctors, engineers, designers doing either Uber or cleaning shifts. So um, when we understood that and we started talking to some of those newcomers, they said, you know what? When you are a refugee specifically, you lose your family, you lose your home, you lose your status, you lose your money, you lose so much. But all of those losses are nothing compared to when we came to Canada and we realized that we are losing our identity. And that was really moving. And then with their help, we navigated the system and we realized that there is this wonderful therapy practice called narrative therapy, where it's focused on the narratives that you're hearing and who you really are. So we group newcomers in based on their professional backgrounds and cultural backgrounds, small groups. They go through 4 sessions of narrative therapy with and this is with collaboration with a narrative therapy center. And then they go to 3 days of camping, which is like the most Canadian experience. But then again, that is in partnership with another organization that is not a refugee organization, Trails Youth Initiative. But then they were willing to extend their support. And then they go through camping in not intense, in beautiful private cabins and like private lake. And they do all sort of like activities, Canadian activities, learning how to canoe, learning those stuff. And it's all run by the Trails Youth Initiative. It's like their thing and they're willing to do that. And then after that, we realized that they call each other family of friends. Like even if we go out of the dynamic, we realize that they're still connected even after years. The kids get connected to each other. They go to each other's houses. They support each other. So that's the thing that we learned, that we cannot and should not limit ourselves to the resources that we see, because there are so many resources available out there. That and if we want to be a resilient agency, we need to figure out and understand the resources that we have, and there are so many.
That's interesting. that part you say about the losing identity is it's depressing.
Mm-hmm. And it's so real, isn't it?
Yeah, it is,
It's
like, because
so
you're like
real.
you lose your family, you lose your country, you lose everything, and then
I
you
know.
you run away, come here, and then again you lose yourself.
Yep.
You know, but we're rounding up here, and I think I have like two more questions for you. I think the
Mm-hmm.
first one, which I find interesting, is the thing around. I really love the idea of personalized support, but I just wonder from a scaling up point of view, do you think it's realistic, or you think that it's a function of we need to rethink how we see the whole system itself? Is that the question? You
Yeah.
know?
You know, it's really interesting because the government is spending millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars on newcomer support. And there is lots of programming that are like basically one size fits all. Everybody has to go to this program. It's short term, many of them are online. I don't want to say that they're not working, but then if you think about the money is spent, I really feel like by collaboration, we can really leverage this money to provide personalized support. Because, as I said, many of those newcomers are educated. They just need a little bit of personalized support and then they can figure it out themselves. If there's a straightforward pathway, it's not that, oh my God, personalized support means that I'm going to take their hand like a child and I have to go through every step. It's not like that. And then you find it amazing when you do provide that personalized support and they get where they wanted to get, how amazing it is that they always come back and they always support another person. So it can be a system, but then it's not. I like as an organization, as a small nonprofit organization, we cannot make it happen for everybody,
Yeah.
and honestly, we don't have that in our agenda. Our agenda is to support each person to the fullest. That's why sometimes we get rejected from fundings because they're like, oh, you're spending too much money on each person. We're like, yeah, because it's like a year-long support. We don't want them to go through one workshop and say, goodbye, we have nothing to do with you. Um, but then the impact that you see based on the amount of dollars spent on each person is really significant.
Hmm.
So if we do a little bit of analysis like that to understand, so okay, per dollar we're spending on each person, how much are we getting back?
Yeah.
And I, like yourself, I don't like to talk dollars and cents, but then that's the reality, and it's okay to do that because then we can show that this is actually
Hmm. Hmm.
economically makes more sense
Hmm.
because they're gonna get to the jobs that they are trained for,
Yeah.
and then they're gonna pay taxes, and
Yeah.
they're not gonna rely on welfare system because, like, for a refugee to rely on a welfare system, if they get out of the welfare system within the year, within first year, they're
That's a
good to go.
win. That's a win.
They're good to go. But if they're not, it showed that they basically either leave the welfare system within the first year or they stay way longer.
Oh damn.
It's like if you can get them out of the welfare system as soon as possible within the first year, it's going to be a success. But then if they stay, they're going to stay for a longer time.
Hmm.
So uh, I really feel like this is up to us as social philanthropists in this space because we don't have limitations. We are innovative. We are evidence based. And we just have to showcase that, look, this model works. And I'm going to enable you to do that. I'm gonna connect refugees and newcomers to you. I'm gonna do the need assessment. I'm gonna do the evaluation. You just have to be a little bit flexible. And sometimes they don't wanna. I'm telling you.
So my last question, and I think this is more like, I feel like, because I feel like, this thing you said about for newcomers by newcomers, it's so important, And so, like, in one sentence, or you want like, what's like, I need you to say something. Tell me, for all the newcomers who listen to this, why they should please do more social work. Because we can make this work because we understand it, and I feel like no one is saying this as a lot, like, but it makes sense as you put it. We understand our lived experience, and so we can talk about it. And so it's more like, for you, what's the biggest reason why an immigrant should basically say, I need to bring out some time and invest in social work? What's your biggest reason why?
It's a great question. And I really feel like we need to stick to this model that if there is something for us, it has to be with us. It's if you want to be really empowered in the system and empower others that went through the lived experiences that you went through, you have to show up and you have to talk. And can I tell you something? I really don't feel like that's the issue of ignorance per se among newcomer communities. That's the issue of confidence. Like, we had this wonderful person. We hired him as a cultural ambassador. He was a cleaner. And back home, he was the principal of this huge school. And he had to leave his country because he was doing peace education. And he was a principal for years, and he had so many brilliant ideas. He came to our organization as a cultural ambassador. And then he started talking about different things. And we were like, you know what? Can you write a proposal for this program? And he did. And we did the program. And it worked. And now he has a job in another social sector. And he is in the right place that he wanted to be because he was confident to speak up, to talk about what he thinks is important. Yes, the programs were top down. The services are sometimes restrictive. But then if you value your own experience enough, then people start valuing your experience. Because I think we shouldn't forget that newcomers are the experts. They've been through it. They know it. So if we cannot always wait for a person to come approach us and give us a microphone to echo our voice, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
Sometimes we need to be loud. Sometimes we need to be confident. And we need to speak up. Because then if we do, sometimes it's going to work out. Sometimes some people are going to listen to us. So I would say it's mainly the issue of confidence among newcomer communities.
Thank you. Thank you for all the lessons. Like, thank you. Like, gosh, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the mic.
No, honestly, like, really, thank you. I mean, it's been some conversation, one with a lot for me to go think about. But thank you so much. And keep up the good work. Honestly, like, really keep up the good work. Like, we need more of this. We need to do more of this. So, from the bottom of my heart, I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
If you got to this point, I'm sure you know what I'm about to say. If you're an immigrant, you need to find a way to support social services. I think we are best placed to help make Canada immigration much, much better. I mean, it doesn't have to be everybody, but find a way. As Fatemeh says, speak up, share experience, share your story. But thank you for getting to this point of the podcast. This was a really good one. If you know someone I should talk to, please send them my way. If you know someone you think will find this useful, please send to them. As always, please sign up, subscribe, share, repost, restack, do everything for us. We need your support. We're on Substack, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, anywhere you get a podcast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, everywhere, we're all there. Thank you so much.